What if the life you've always known, the one filled with struggle, sacrifice, and the quiet ache of just getting by, was built on a lie? For one waitress, a single thoughtless insult from a wealthy patron was the spark that would ignite the past and change everything. This is a story about a silver locket, a truth buried for decades, and a test of character so profound it could either shatter a young woman's spirit or forge her into the person she was always meant to be. Alara traced the rim of a water glass with a damp cloth, her movements automatic, honed by 1,000 shifts. The low hum of the exclusive restaurant, a place of hushed negotiations and discreet celebrations, was a world away from the rattling radiator in her tiny apartment. Here, she was a ghost, a pair of hands meant to be efficient and invisible. Every dollar, every tip, was a drop in the vast, terrifying ocean of her sister's medical bills. Maya's laughter, once the brightest sound in her life, was now a fragile echo she fought to keep from fading entirely. Exhaustion was a constant companion, a heavy cloak she couldn't shrug off. Tonight, the weight was heavier. A new experimental treatment was on the table, a sliver of hope with a price tag that might as well have been the moon. Her gaze drifted to the table in the corner, occupied by two men in suits so sharp they could have cut glass. The older man, with eyes the color of a winter storm, sat in stoic silence. The younger one seethed, his voice a venomous whisper that carried across the polished floors. "It was a catastrophic failure, Alistair," the younger man hissed, gesturing sharply. "Your sentimentality is going to ruin us." The older man, Alistair, didn't flinch. His silence seemed to infuriate the other man more. As Alara approached to refill their water, the younger man's frustration found a new target. He jolted his arm, knocking his glass over. Ice and water flooded the white linen. "Clumsy fool," he snapped, not at himself, but directly at her. "Is it that difficult? Or do they hire anyone?" "Where?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly raw. "Did you get that locket?" The question, and the intensity behind it, hung in the air, a sudden sharp note in the restaurant's quiet symphony. For the first time all night, Alara was no longer invisible. She was seen, and in the depths of that billionaire's stormy eyes, a long-forgotten story was beginning to stir. The younger man, Marcus, scoffed. "Alistair, don't be ridiculous. It's a piece of cheap jewelry. We have more important things to discuss than the waitress's trinkets." But Alistair Vance didn't seem to hear him. His focus was entirely on Alara, his gaze locked on the silver hummingbird in her hand. The world around them seemed to fade, the clinking of cutlery and the murmur of conversation dissolving into a distant buzz. For Alara, who was accustomed to being overlooked, the intensity of his stare was both unnerving and strangely validating. "It was my mother's," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "She gave it to me before she passed away." Alistair's jaw tightened. He seemed to be holding back a tide of emotion, the effort visible in the rigid set of his shoulders. He gestured to the empty chair at their table, a command more than an invitation. "Please, sit." Marcus looked aghast. "What are you doing? She's the staff." "Marcus, be silent," Alistair ordered, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus, for all his bluster, immediately fell quiet, his face a mask of indignant fury. Hesitantly, Alara sat, perching on the edge of the velvet seat. She was acutely aware of the other diners, their curious glances, her manager's worried frown from across the room. She felt like an intruder, a drab sparrow who had accidentally flown into a gilded cage. Alistair leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "My name is Alistair Vance. I knew someone, a very long time ago, who had a locket just like that. Identical. It was one of a kind." He paused, studying her face, searching for something she couldn't comprehend. "Restaurant. I want to offer you a job." Marcus choked on his wine. "A job? Are you insane?" Alistair ignored him. "I will pay you 10 times what you make here. Your duties will be undefined for now. I need you to come to my office tomorrow. We need to talk, without interruption. And I need you to bring anything you have of your mother's. Letters, photographs, anything at all." He slid a black business card across the table. The name, Alistair Vance, CEO, Vance Industries, was embossed in stark silver letters. "My driver will be at your address at 9 a.m. Please, say you'll come." The offer was ludicrous. It made no sense. A billionaire CEO offering a waitress a high-paying job because of a piece of jewelry. It felt like a dream, or perhaps a cruel joke. But looking into his eyes, Elara saw no deception. She saw a desperate, haunting sorrow. And more than that, she saw a flicker of the one thing she was running out of: hope. For Maya, for their future. She had to take this chance, no matter how strange it seemed. "Okay," she breathed, her fingers closing around the card. "I'll be there." The next morning, a sleek black car, silent as a shadow, was waiting outside her crumbling apartment building. Elara, dressed in the only nice blouse she owned, clutched a small shoebox filled with her mother's few possessions. The drive through the city was a journey between worlds. The grey, gritty streets of her neighborhood slowly gave way to polished avenues, lined with steel and glass towers that clawed at the sky. The Vance Industries building was the tallest of them all, a monument to power and wealth that made her feel impossibly small. Alistair Vance's office was on the top floor. It wasn't an office. It was a kingdom. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the entire city, a god's-eye perspective that was both breathtaking and intimidating. The space was minimalist and cold, decorated in shades of charcoal and chrome, except for one wall. That wall was covered in framed photographs, a silent testament to a life lived before this sterile empire. Alistair was waiting. He stared at it for a long, silent moment, his thumb gently stroking the edge of the photo. Then he picked up one of the letters. His eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, and a sharp, ragged breath escaped him. This script. "I'd know it anywhere," he whispered, more to himself than to her. He moved to the journal, opening it to a random page. He read for a moment, and his composure finally broke. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away, but not before Elara saw it. "This office. It feels familiar," Elara found herself saying, the words surprising even her. "I know that's impossible, but—" Her voice trailed off as her eyes landed on the wall of photographs. She walked towards it, drawn by an invisible pull. Most of the photos were of Alistair with various business partners or of landscapes, but in the very center was a large, slightly older photo of a smiling, dark-haired woman. Her face was beautiful, filled with a light that seemed to leap from the frame. Elara froze. She knew that smile. She had seen a faded, smaller version of it her whole life. She pulled the locket from under her blouse and opened its tiny clasp. Inside was a miniature, aged photograph of the same woman. "Who is she?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. Alistair had come to stand beside her. His voice was heavy with a sorrow that seemed to fill the vast room. That, he said, is Isabella, my wife. He paused, his gaze fixed on the photo. She died, almost 28 years ago, in a car accident. Our newborn daughter, died with her. The words hung in the air, cold and final. But they didn't make sense. If this was his wife, why was her picture in the locket her own mother had worn every single day? A confusing, impossible question began to form in Ilara's mind, a seed of doubt that sent a chill down her spine. The story she had been told her entire life, the very foundation of her identity, was beginning to crack. The sterile silence of the penthouse was shattered by the sharp click. Them dismissively. What is all this? A collection of sentimental junk she's using to spin some sob story? You can't possibly be falling for this. Ilara felt a surge of anger. These were my mother's things, she said, her voice shaking but firm. They are not junk. Marcus let out a cruel laugh. Your mother's things? How convenient. A locket that just so happens to resemble one my aunt used to own. A few old letters. Anyone could forge these things. It's pathetic, really. But I suppose I have to admire the ambition. He turned back to Alistair. Fire her. Send her on her way with a few dollars for her trouble, and let's be done with this nonsense. We have the quarterly earnings call in an hour. I will not, Alistair stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ilara is my guest, and she is helping me with a personal matter of great importance. The defiance in Alistair's voice seemed to fuel Marcus's fury. He saw his position, his inheritance, his entire future being threatened by this nobody. His ambition twisted into outright hostility. He decided to change tactics, turning his focus back to Ilara, his words designed to be surgical and cruel. Let me guess, Marcus said, leaning in close to her, his voice a conspiratorial sneer. You have a sick relative, don't you? A mountain of debt. It's always the same story. You saw a lonely old man, a titan of industry, and you saw your meal ticket. You probably researched him, found out about his tragic past, and cooked up this entire scheme. Each word was a poisoned dart, striking at her deepest insecurities and her most painful realities. He was twisting her genuine hardship into a weapon against her. Ilara recoiled as if struck. The mention of Maya, the truth of her desperation, made his accusations feel even more vile. You don't know anything about me, she whispered, clutching the locket so tightly its edges dug into her palm. I know your type, Marcus said, straightening up with an air of finality. And you will not get a single cent from this family. Of Ilara's shoebox. He treated the journal and letters as sacred texts, poring over them for hours, comparing the handwriting to old cards and notes from his wife that he retrieved from a dusty vault in his personal study. Ilara would sit with him, answering questions about her mother's habits, her fears, the places they had lived. A fragile, unspoken alliance formed between them. A shared quest for a truth that grew more complex with every page they turned. One afternoon, while Alistair was in a board meeting, Ilara felt an urge to organize the personal study he had unlocked for her. It was a room frozen in time, filled with Isabella's books, her sheet music, and a faint, lingering scent of lavender. It was the heart of Alistair's grief, a place he hadn't dared to disturb for nearly 3 decades. As she carefully dusted a bookshelf, her fingers brushed against a hollow-sounding section at the back. Curious, she pushed aside a row of classic novels and found a small, hidden compartment. Inside was a small, locked metal box. When Alistair returned, his face etched with the fatigue of battling his board and, no doubt, his nephew, Ilara showed him the box. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Isabella's," he murmured. "She called it her box of secrets. I never had the key." He looked at Ilara, then at the locket around her neck. "The hummingbird," he said suddenly. "The eye. It's not a jewel." Ilara lifted the locket. On the side of the silver bird, a tiny, almost invisible clasp was hidden within the intricate feather design. With a delicate click, the head of the hummingbird opened on a minuscule hinge. Tucked inside was not a picture, but a tiny, ornate silver key. It was a perfect match for the lock on the box. With a shared, held breath, they opened it. It didn't contain jewels or money. It contained a diary, its leather cover identical to the one Ilara had brought, but this one was thicker, more worn. And beneath it, a sheaf of official-looking documents, bound with a faded ribbon. Indistinct smear. She sank into a chair, her mind reeling, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her life. The constant moving, the fear in her mother's eyes, the lack of any family history. It all snapped into a horrific, tragic focus. Alistair read the entry aloud, his voice cracking, breaking on his daughter's name. He looked up at Ilara, his stormy eyes filled with a lifetime of stolen grief and newfound wonder. "Ilara," he whispered, the name a prayer on his lips. He shuffled through the documents beneath the diary. There were 2 birth certificates. One for Ilara Vance, listing Alistair and Isabella as her parents. And another, a forged one, for Ilara Reed, the name she had always known. There was also a detailed, threatening letter from Alistair's father, Horatio Vance, outlining the terms of her disappearance. It was undeniable proof of a monstrous deception. The mystery of the locket was solved, but it had unlocked a truth far more painful and profound than either of them could have imagined. The revelation settled over the following days, a heavy cloak of shared grief and nascent connection. They were strangers, a father and daughter separated by a chasm of lies and lost time. They began to talk, not as CEO and Waitress, but as 2 people trying to build a bridge across that chasm. Ilara spoke of her mother's love, her resilience, the bedtime stories that were, she now realized, veiled memories of a life of privilege and love she had been forced to leave behind. Alistair spoke of Isabella, their whirlwind romance, his devastation, and the hollow decades he had endured, believing his family was gone forever. Ilaris, during one of these quiet conversations, that Marcus, who had been suspiciously absent, made his move. He entered the office unannounced, his demeanor no longer one of simple arrogance, but of cold, calculated power. "Touching," he said, surveying the scene. "A regular family reunion. I'm afraid I'm here to put an end to it." He placed a sleek tablet on the table and swiped the screen, revealing money to ensure Maya would have the best medical care for the rest of her life, 10 times over. It was a figure that could erase every financial worry she had ever had. "Here's the offer," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, persuasive tone. "You take this. You sign a non-disclosure agreement, stating this whole long-lost daughter story was a misunderstanding, a lie you concocted out of desperation. You disappear, and I make sure your sister gets whatever she needs. In return, He looked back at Alistair. You remain as a figurehead CEO, but I take over all operational control. The company is secured, and everyone gets what they want. Your daughter gets her money, and you get to keep your pride. It was the ultimate test, a devil's bargain. He was offering her the very thing she had been fighting for, the very reason she had taken this impossible chance in the first place. Maya's future. All she had to do was betray the truth. Betray her mother's memory. Betray the father she had just found. She looked at the check, then at Alistair's anguished face. He was leaving the choice to her, his expression conveying a silent trust she had only just earned. Her entire life had been a struggle for survival. Marcus was offering her an escape, a golden door out of the prison of poverty and fear. But as she looked at him, at his smug, cruel face, she knew that walking through that door would mean losing the one thing her mother had managed to preserve through all the hardship. Her integrity. Ilara took a deep breath, the air in the opulent office feeling thin and tight. She looked at the check, a slip of paper that represented an end to all her suffering. She saw Maya's face, pale in a hospital bed, and her heart clenched with a fierce, painful love. Then she looked at Alistair, at the flicker of hope in his tired eyes, a hope she had ignited. He had lost his wife and, for 28 years, believed he had lost his daughter. Marcus was asking her to make him lose her, or couldn't comprehend an integrity that couldn't be bought. Alistair, who had been watching with bated breath, let out a shaky sigh of relief. A slow, proud smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile Ilara had ever seen from him. It transformed him, chasing the shadows from his eyes. He had tested her, in a way, by letting her make the choice. And she had chosen him. She had chosen their family. You foolish, sentimental girl, Marcus finally spat, his composure cracking into raw fury. You have just thrown away everything. You could have saved your sister. Now you will have nothing. I will fight this in court for years. I will drag your mother's name through the mud. I will prove she was nothing but a manipulative gold digger who abandoned her child, and I will paint you as her greedy successor. No, Alistair said, his voice booming with a sudden, commanding authority that had been absent for years. You won't. He stood up, no longer a grieving recluse, but the titan of industry he once was. Because you seem to have forgotten something, Marcus. My father was a monster, but he was a meticulous monster. He kept records of everything. Alistair walked to his desk and pressed a button on his intercom. Cynthia, please bring in the files from the Horatio's Contingencies archive. And please ask Mr. Davies from Legal to join us. Marcus's face went pale. What files? What are you talking about? My father's private files. The ones detailing his dirtiest dealings. Your father, my dear brother, was his right-hand man in many of them, including the coercion of my wife. He documented your father's involvement, his complicity, everything. When your father passed away, you inherited his copy of those files, didn't you? That's how you knew the truth about Ilara all along. You didn't just stumble upon it. You've been holding on to it, waiting for the perfect moment to use it as leverage to seize control of the company. The truth of Alistair's words hit Marcus, this company. As if on cue, the office door opened. Two security guards and a stern-looking lawyer entered the room. "Marcus Thorne," Alistair declared, his voice resonating with the finality of a judge's gavel. "You are fired. Your security access is revoked. You will be escorted from the building, and you can expect to hear from our legal team regarding charges of fraud and conspiracy." Marcus stared, his face ashen, his empire of ambition crumbling to dust around him. He looked from Alistair's resolute face to Ilara's unwavering gaze. In her eyes, he didn't see the meek waitress he had insulted. He saw the rightful heir, a woman whose character had been forged in hardship and proven to be unbreakable. He was led away, speechless, defeated not by power or money, but by the simple, incorruptible power of the truth. The long night of deception was finally over. Justice, after 28 years, had finally begun to dawn. In the aftermath, the world shifted. The name Ilara Vance replaced Ilara Reed. News of the reunion, the deception, and Marcus's dismissal became a quiet legend in the business world. A tale of secrets and vindication. But for Ilara and Alistair, the victory wasn't in the headlines or the corporate power shift. It was in the small, quiet moments. It was in Alistair taking her to the places he and Isabella had loved, telling her stories of the mother she had known, but never truly known. Alistair poured the full resources of the Vance Foundation into Maya's care. They flew in specialists from around the world, and the experimental treatment that had once been an impossible dream became a reality. Ilara was there every step of the way, no longer worrying about bills, only about her sister's recovery. She and Alistair would spend hours by Maya's bedside, reading to her, talking, becoming a family. The cold, sterile penthouse was slowly filled with warmth, with laughter, and with the scent of flowers Maya loved. One crisp autumn afternoon, months later, Ilara stood with Alistair on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out over the city. Maya, now in remission and gaining strength every day.
"Mother would be so proud of you, Ilara. You have her courage, her integrity." Ilara leaned her head against him, a simple gesture of comfort and belonging that had been missing from her life for so long. She was not just a survivor anymore. She was a daughter, a protector, the guardian of a legacy of love and truth. The struggle was over, and a new life, one of security, purpose, and family, was just beginning. Justice had been served, not in a courtroom, but in the quiet healing of a broken family, finally made whole. The past could not be erased, and the years lost could never be reclaimed. The scars of the deception would always remain, a quiet reminder of the cruelty one man's greed could inflict upon so many. But looking at the life they were now building, a life of healing and reconnection, Ilara knew that the future was not defined by the pain that came before, but by the choices made in the face of it. The path forward was paved with the love her mother had fought so hard to protect. A love that had finally found its way home. In a world that so often measures a person's worth by their wealth or status, how do we measure the value of integrity? A single piece of silver, a simple locket, held more power than $1 billion fortune, because it represented a truth that could not be bought or sold. Ilara's story reminds us that true strength isn't found in what we own, but in the character we uphold when tested, and that the most profound riches are the love we fight to protect, and the family we dare to reclaim. If this story of resilience, love, and ultimate justice touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share it with others who might find inspiration in it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the enduring power of the human spirit.
Your support helps us continue to share tales that matter. Thank you for watching.